All right, today we're going to take a peek inside one of the most complex, most sophisticated operations on the entire planet. And I'm talking about the command center inside your own body that controls every single move you make. We are going to demystify this incredible system of motor control.
I mean, have you ever really thought about it? That simple act of picking up your coffee, or walking across the room, or even just a simple nod. It feels completely effortless, right? But behind the curtain, it's an absolute masterpiece of biological engineering. And to really get our heads around it, we're going to use this fantastic metaphor. Let's picture your motor control system as a massive, super efficient corporation. We'll call it Movement Incorporated. It's got a whole corporate structure, a clear hierarchy, specialized departments, a chain of command, and they all have to work together perfectly to get the job done.
So for this explainer, we're going to go on a full-blown tour of Movement Inc. We'll start with how the chain of command works, then we'll visit the shop floor, check in with management, meet the big bosses in the C-suite, and finally, see how the whole operation comes together. So, let's jump right in.
You know, any great company has its guiding principles, right? Well, Movement Inc. runs on two core ideas for how it processes signals. And if you can grasp these two, everything else is going to make so much more sense.
So on one hand, you've got hierarchical processing. This is your classic top-down management style. The C-suite up top, they're handling the big abstract strategy, and the orders just flow right down the chain. But then on the other hand, you have parallel processing. This is way more like modern team collaboration. A signal gets sent out to a bunch of different departments all at the same time, and they can all feed their input to a single project manager to help make a decision. The amazing part is, Movement Inc. uses both of these systems at the same time, which makes it incredibly powerful and super adaptable.
And what's really important here is that this all follows a pretty logical flow. It all kicks off with sensing the world around you, right? Then you perceive and interpret that information, which leads to conceptualizing an idea. Like, I'm thirsty. From there, you strategize a plan of attack, and finally, you execute the movement. It's like a perfectly seamless assembly line, taking you from a simple thought all the way to a physical action.
All right, let's start our tour where the rubber meets the road. We're heading down to the ground floor, the engine room of the whole company, the spinal cord. This is where the real action happens.
So, the spinal cord is basically staffed by the company's lowest-level employees. These are the folks on the ground, the ones actually receiving sensory data and carrying out the final orders from upstairs. It's what's known as the final common pathway, the point where commands become actual physical action. Now, they handle a lot of automatic stuff like reflexes, but don't you dare underestimate them. These employees are a lot smarter than you might think.
And if you need proof of just how smart the spinal cord is on its own, get this, in some pretty wild experiments, cats could still perform a perfectly coordinated walking motion on a treadmill, even after the connection to their brain had been severed. This is huge. It shows us the spinal cord isn't just a dumb messenger taking orders. It has its own built-in programs and expertise for complex patterns like walking.
Okay, time to move on up the corporate ladder. Let's go meet the managers and some of the company's most important consultants. These are the parts of the brain that refine, coordinate, and tweak all those raw commands. So first up, we've got the brainstem. Think of it as our middle management. It's a critical hub, especially for things like posture and getting around. And, really importantly, it acts as the doorkeeper to the boardroom, because it processes almost all the sensory info coming up from the spinal cord before it can get to the higher-ups in the cortex. It's just this vital relay center that keeps the entire company running like a well-oiled machine. Now, let's meet the specialists. First, the cerebellum. It's like this back-channel employee, an expert consultant who's always working behind the scenes. See, it gets a copy of the motor plan from the cortex, and at the same time, it gets the actual sensory feedback from the movement itself. It compares the two, the plan versus the reality, and sends suggestions back to fine-tune the action, making sure everything is smooth and accurate. Then you have the basal ganglia. This is the master strategist. It's all about higher-order planning for complex, coordinated movements, helping to select and kickstart just the right plan. And here we are. We've made it to the top floor, the executive suite. This is where the highest-level decisions get made and where the ultimate commands are issued. Welcome to the cerebral cortex. So the cortex as a whole is kind of like the company board. It handles all the big-picture strategy for voluntary movements. The CEO of this whole operation is the primary motor cortex. It's the one issuing the final executive orders.
And it's supported by some key planners that help figure out the difference between movements you just decide to make, like getting up to walk, versus movements that are a reaction, like catching a ball somebody throws at you.
So how does the CO actually give an order? Well, it's not as simple as one neuron for one movement. It's way cooler than that. Instead, each individual neuron has a kind of preferred direction it likes to fire for. So to move your arm to the right, a whole population of neurons starts firing. The final direction you actually move is the sum total, kind of like a democratic vote, of all those neurons firing together. It's this beautiful system of collective decision-making.
Okay, so we've toured the entire company, we've met all the key players. Now let's see how all these different departments work together on a simple, everyday task that you've probably done 1,000 times.
Let's watch the whole company spring into action. It all starts up in the cortex when you conceptualize being thirsty. Then the cortex and the basal ganglia team up to strategize a plan. The cerebellum, our specialist, jumps in to calibrate everything, judging the distance, the weight, using all your past experience to fine-tune the movement. Then the CEO, the primary motor cortex, activates the plan, sending the final order down the chain to the shop floor, the spinal cord, which executes the pour. Just a perfect, coordinated effort from top to bottom.
So this brings us to a really fascinating final question. With everything we know now, if we could somehow look inside the motor cortex and see exactly which neurons were firing at any given moment, could we perfectly predict the movement that's about to happen?
And the answer, which might surprise you, is probably not. Because it turns out the functional task, the why behind the movement, is what really matters. The neurons that light up when you reach out to actually pick up an object are different from the ones that fire when you just make a similar-looking hand gesture. So the ultimate takeaway here is that Movement Inc. doesn't just care about how you move, it cares deeply about why you're moving in the first place. When it comes to motor control, context is everything.